was always kind of taught to dream big and think like a leader. How can we hack the system?
We are producers to its core. We're makers.
That was that moment where I was like, yes, like this was a big one to put us on the map.
Creativity is messy. Perfect is boring.
That to me is good creative. That to me is success.
You can see talent in people. We want to go create the next best brand in the world.
This is who we are and this is what we do.
This is Creatives Offscript. Welcome to the Creatives Offscript podcast sponsored by Assemble. I am your host, Nate Watkin. So who doesn't remember playing with Legos growing up? One of the most recognized brands of generations past and present has continuously reinvented itself from one era to the next. And that's in no small part to the leadership of James Gregson, the head of Lego Social Studio, part of Lego's in-house creative agency. James heads up digital content for this iconic brand, producing dynamic digital campaigns across social channels and continuously engaging with the next generation of builders. Welcome to our podcast, James.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it. So
you had a somewhat unconventional career path at the beginning. Tell me about how you found your way into advertising.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. I think, I wasn't an academic in school by any way, shape, or form. I went to school to play sports, not to learn. I'm sure my parents are thrilled to hear, but we're very evidently aware. I didn't want to go to college. I was, very much just not overly engaged by learning about math, English, science. I also wasn't very good at it, so I think that probably helped. But I ended up going to college due to some sage advice from my dad, who said, I have the rest of my life to work. What's delaying it 4 more years? So I did go to college and, I sort of bounced around from liberal arts major to liberal arts major. I started doing advertising design, didn't find that very interesting. Finally settled on the very transferable skills of computer animation major with a minor in painting. I'm being facetious there, not transferable skills. But I was in college when Facebook came out. And I ended up getting an internship at a marketing firm, and they were pitching a new piece of business that was basically a unique social network that was from Europe. And I'm originally from England. And the chairwoman of the business at the time was walking the halls going, who knows anything about social networking? And has anyone heard of this? And I was like, yeah, sure. I raised my hand. I knew nothing about what it was. The social network is a Scandinavian social network at the time. And long story short, I got taken to the new business pitch as an intern. I had a fake title, a fake bio, and we ended up winning the business. And I sort of very quickly realized that I had a knack for this sort of stuff. And not only that I knew more about what was the early days of social networking than most senior executives in the marketing world, purely at that time because it was a new thing.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So it was kind of a fake it till you make it type of scenario at the beginning of your career.
I will not lie. It is absolutely a fake it until you make it. But it was also similar to what Malcolm Gladwell talks about in The Tipping Point, right? Where it's just, they talks about the fact that Bill Gates, while obviously an incredibly smart person, was in existence and around when the home computers and PCs were becoming of age. So it was serendipitous timing as well, I think.
Absolutely. You then founded a branding agency early on in your career. What are some of the biggest lessons you learned about starting your own business?
Yeah, it was a risky undertaking, definitely. But I had also reached a point in my agency life. I'd worked for agencies of different sizes, independently owned, publicly owned, startups. And I think I was frustrated with a number of things, but primarily it was at the time when the economy was going through a pretty significant recession and budgets were being squeezed, and I was asking to do more and more with less and less. So I, did the very unstrategic thing of quit without a plan. Again, not something I would overly recommend anybody do. And just started networking. I had a solid network of people within the industry, within the marketing space, and was lucky to pick up my own client very quickly. I think what I learned quickly was that the stress of having your own business is completely different. Having to chase people and chase clients as nice as you can for the third late payment that is probably going towards your mortgage, your health insurance, and whatever else it is a very different stress to the day-to-day stress of working at a business where you're getting your salary every 2 weeks or every month and that sort of stuff. So it was a different mentality, and also the habit of never settling, right? So I learned very quickly that when you had, even at a time where I had my workload full and I had a good solid number of clients and projects in a given month, that could change immediately, right? And irrespective of how much work you had or what your workload looked like, I forcibly made sure that I reached out to someone new or someone that I hadn't spoken to in a long time every week, just to keep dialogues going and keep my name top of people's minds, because you never know when a client's going to fire you or, move on or, close up shop or go a different way. So yeah, I think it's a different type of stress is the main thing that I learned.
Yeah, certainly a lot of pros and cons with entrepreneurship. I can attest to that. So how did you find your way over to Lego's social media department?
Yeah, so through my digital consultancy that I had, I offered a range of services. I had my own clients where I was running community management or social media advertising, but I also sort of white labeled my services to smaller agencies, PR agencies that didn't have the social media competencies at the time, which at that time, roughly 7 or 8 years ago, that was pretty prevalent. There were a lot of specialist social media firms, but not a lot of generalist marketing firms that also did social. And so I started working with, at that time, their PR agency of about 15 years, Flashpoint, that was based out in San Francisco, and helped them with a number of projects. And they brought me into a couple Lego projects. And then the role opened, and I guess technically my client, well, technically not my client, but my client's client, I guess. So the PR agency's client let me know about the role at Lego and recommended me for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how was that transition from, your own consultancy to Lego? Was there anything that surprised you about the way things worked at Lego?
Oh yeah, that's a loaded question, seeing as I still work at Lego and I do love the company. Yeah, obviously there's massive differences to working for yourself, making your own decisions about how you run your own business, to working for a massive business like Lego. So yeah, the first 6 months were incredibly challenging for me, just in terms of accomplishing something. It sounds silly. But when I worked for myself, I was able to make a decision, execute that decision, and see the fruits of my labor, right? Whether positive or negative. I think at a large organization, a matrixed organization as well, that is truly global, where over collaboration and over alignment is part of the culture, it was honestly very frustrating, and is still, somewhat frustrating, but I understand why they're the brand they are today because of that over alignment. Right. And there's, a lot of stakeholders that feed into making a decision at a brand like Lego, and for good reason. But as I said, coming from my own setup where I got to do what I wanted to do because I thought this was the right decision, that was a challenging transition, a very long, challenging transition.
Yeah. And so speaking of accomplishments, what would you say was your first big accomplishment at Lego?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I think it's going to sound silly, but Lego is a complicated organization. We have, I think, more acronyms than I would ever recommend. And I see it as small wins. I think at a organization like Lego, it is challenging to have a massive win that you can solely feel responsible for, because as I said, there's so many stakeholders involved in a process, but it was everything from, probably that the major win would be, I think, so I had a new team that had never had a manager before, or never had an in-person manager. Their manager was remote. So, I think after the first three months or so, getting that team to really buy into me and believe in what I was doing was always going to be a challenge. understanding that they had never had, as I said, an in-person manager. So I think around, sort of month 6 or 7, I really started feeling like the team believed in me, respected my opinion, and felt, I had their back. And that, to me, irrespective of the work and the output, is always going to be the most important element, because you are nothing without the people that report into you and your team around you. So,
yeah, it's a great accomplishment. I mean, getting your team to believe in you is the most important thing. I would 100% agree with that. Up next, James gives us a sneak peek inside Lego's in-house creative agency. But first, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about Assemble, the industry-leading project management platform designed for producers. Assemble gives your team an end-to-end project management solution featuring calendars, task lists, and industry-specific features such as casting, location management, call sheets, advanced post-production review, and more. And of course, this platform has been designed from the ground up by producers for producers. Assemble is being used by industry-leading production companies, agencies, and brands to help them streamline their content production. If you're currently paying for a multitude of different tools and you just want one project management solution that can fulfill all of your workflow needs, try Assemble today. Our listeners get a special discount of 20% off for their first year. Just enter the code Offscript, that's one word, at checkout. Learn more at assemble.tv/project-management. That's assemble.tv/project-management. You are listening to the Creatives Offscript podcast. So you have an internal creative agency at Lego. What does the structure of that look like?
Yeah, so for us, the global social media team has gone through a pretty significant change. We were sort of a standalone team within the organization, and we have since, it's about a year and a half old now. We are now, or components of our social media team are now part of our internal creative agency. So I think prior to moving into the internal creative agency, we had everything from channel strategy to channel management to some creative production to editorial planning to publishing to media buying to analytics and performance marketing, all within one team, which was incredibly effective to be agile as you needed to be within social, but it wasn't truly scalable and didn't really support our regional marketing partners. So it's evolved now where there are social studios that live within Lego's internal creative agency, where we are responsible for creating a lot of the organic social content you see on Lego's own channels. We also play a consultative role on a lot of the campaign content and sort of larger product launch campaigns. How that content plays out on social channels is critical. And then we have things like, there's a strategy team within the agency, and our social strategy, there are social strategist specialists within that department. We have, social analytics specialists that are within our data and analytics teams now. So that's sort of how that, our engagement team is now, those roles now live within customer service, and we primarily focus on customer service like engagement across Twitter and other channels. So that's how it's sort of evolved now. And it's a super exciting setup, and a setup that gladly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it sounds great. And what kind of in-house production capabilities do you have?
Yeah. So, I think we strike the balance of wanting to be agile in the ability to produce social content that should not take a lot of time. Right. I think, we've got several cases of very high performing content that took, no more than 3 hours of in-house time, from conceptualization to greenlighting to designing to publishing. Right. That's obviously the gold standard. Not every, output on our social channels takes 3 hours. I wish. So we have a range of capabilities, within our social teams, our social studio teams. We have video producers and video editors, because video is such a critical component of the social world. But we have an internal creative resource pool that we pull in for various needs. And then, of course, for anything at scale or outside of what we feel we need to bring sort of external expertise in, whether that be a long form YouTube series or something along those lines, will continue to art direct it as sort of a lead agency model, but bring in specialists for those larger, longer term projects, just to make sure that we're not always relying on what we have internally, but, balancing it out with external resources as well.
Up next, we'll hear how Daniel sold his house to fund his vision for MusicBed and put all of his chips on the table. But first, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about Assemble, the industry-leading project management platform designed for producers. Assemble gives your team an end-to-end project management solution featuring calendars, task lists, and industry-specific features such as casting, location management, call sheets, advanced post-production review, and more. And of course, this platform has been designed from the ground up by producers for producers. Assemble is being used by industry-leading production companies, agencies, and brands to help them streamline their content production. If you're currently paying for a multitude of different tools and you just want one project management solution that can fulfill all of your workflow needs, try Assemble today. Our listeners get a special discount of 20% off for their first year. Just enter the code Offscript, that's one word, at checkout. Learn more at assemble.tv/project-management. That's assemble.tv/project-management. You are listening to the Creatives Offscript podcast. And what tools do you use to manage your team's collaboration and workflow, especially now in this new remote landscape that we're in?
Yes. So my boss, the genius that she is not the tech savviest, and she'll be fine saying that. She actually, pre-COVID, I'm trying to remember when it was, but I think by January 1st of this year, we were all on Microsoft Teams. It's very simply, it was an IT approved system, and just with the file architecture, our historic server setup, and the way that we wanted to really properly collaborate, it made sense. So thank goodness she made that recommendation, because obviously in this day and age, given that we're all working from home and have been since March or however long it is, lost track, I have no idea how we could have gotten anything done without something like Teams. So Teams will be a critical part of how we do our business and how we collaborate and how we get things done. And it's certainly been a fascinating part of, working from home for an extended period of time, how it's evolved ways of working, right? And I think, there's potentially brand new roles that have opened up in terms of, what a Teams assistant and Teams manager looks like, and that sort of community management role of what needs to happen on Teams and what doesn't need to happen on Teams and that sort of stuff. But Teams is a massive component of our day-to-day.
Yeah, it's incredible how critical these tools are becoming in this new world to enable the teams to collaborate.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Definitely. How, in general, would you describe Lego's marketing vision?
Yeah. Okay. How would I do? That's a big question. I mean, I think Lego's marketing vision is to establish itself as more than a toy company. And I think it was a first step with the movies to establish us as an entertainment brand. And we've got a really strong catalog of entertainment content for kids on, Netflix and traditional TV, Amazon Prime, etc. But really taking it to the masses with the movies was the first step. We often talk internally about becoming an experience brand, right? Similar to an Apple, there is that sort of premium, very clear branded experience with everything that you touch with Apple, right? I remember I shamelessly got the Apple credit card for no good reason. I didn't need a new credit card, but I wanted to see what that experience was like, right? And that the premium experience of the physical card itself, but even the mailer that the card was in, right? I think you talk about Apple as the prime example of an experience brand. And I think we are constantly looking at how to establish ourselves as an experience brand, right? From going into our Lego brand retail stores to buying a product to then how do you experience that product digitally and physically? We want to, as I said, we want to become more than just a toy brand. Yeah.
And building off that, how would you say that Lego is uniquely positioned to engage with your audience on social media?
Yeah. I think it certainly helps having a widely loved brand. right? It sounds obvious. It certainly makes my job and my team's job and the teams across the globe, our job increasingly easy, right? And I think it reinforces the purpose of what we try to do in social, right? So our sort of brand vision is to inspire the builders of tomorrow. And I think that is a sort of a foundational strategy to our social content, right? It should inspire people at a very basic level. And I think that's a really critical component to what our social channel strategy is. So if you look at it on Instagram, it is obviously nuanced across social channels because we believe we want to have specific expressions across those different social channels. So on Instagram, you're going to see a much more visually strong, sort of a bigger lean into UGC content because our fans are so fantastic at creating really strong visuals. Whereas on Facebook, you're going to see a lot more news-related social video first type content. So yeah, I think that the best way to summarize it up is that our goal is to always inspire people. And hopefully you see that across a lot of the content that we create and publish on our channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think are some things that people take for granted about social media marketing in general?
I think social media marketing and social media in general has unfortunately become the dumping ground for all things marketing and communications, right? Because it is, air quotes, so easy, right? Everyone's got a Facebook page. Everyone can publish something on Facebook. I think there is an expectation across stakeholders and marketing specialists or anyone that wants to leverage an audience on social media that you can reach a lot of people really easily. And I think it's about being a lot more strategic of that and a lot more specific and purpose-driven behind that, right? I use this example all the time of, I'm not going to go into specifics, but let's say I am a video gamer, right? And I want to publish my content on an entertainment channel. What percentage of that audience on that, let's say, entertainment Facebook channel are gamers? You can find that out for free very easily. But what people don't understand is the organic reach, let's say the rough percentage of organic reach on a given post is, let's just say roughly, it's usually below 10%. Let's say it's 5%, right? But if we know that the audience on your Facebook page, only 20% of them like video games or have an interest based on Facebook's insights in video games, that organic post is reaching a very small percentage of the actual audience that is actually going to have an interest or that will have an interest in that piece of content. And that is rarely considered. And it's also a critical component of why paid media is such a critical component to social.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And what are some good rules of thumbs to consider when creating a social campaign?
Yeah, broad question. I think the audience, it's got to go back to the audience, right? So, when you're typically picking, all social channels are not created equal from an audience perspective, number one, right? Who's on there, as well as from a content consumption perspective, right? How someone consumes content on YouTube is very different to how someone consumes content on Pinterest. And one creative campaign is not created equal across social channels, right? So it pains me when I see, a traditional TV commercial being run on other social channels, even to some extent, a TV commercial being run on YouTube, although that is more traditional than, say, on Facebook, right? So I think it's being very specific about what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to reach, defining a channel strategy off of that, and then ensuring that you are producing content specifically for those channels, specifically for those audiences. Sounds super basic, but I think people tend to consider what they are trying to achieve from a brand marketing standpoint or from a communication standpoint, rather than taking into consideration what works for the channels and what works for the audiences within those channels. So that's part A, B, and C. And then finally, even more nuanced than that, when we talk about paid social media and creating sort of what does your marketing toolbox or your asset toolbox look like across a given campaign, I often use, and this isn't created by me. I don't want to take credit for it at all, but Facebook is very specific about creating a series of ad units across an attention span, right? Or a series of post types across an attention span, right? From everything from GIFs to image posts, all the way through to an instant experience ad. That's probably, the deepest dive and deepest experience you can have from an ad unit on social. It's really important that you create content across that spectrum of attention spans, making sure that you have a different content types that will hopefully reach and engage with different audience types across that attention span. Because there's no point in having, going all in on, a long form video just based on what we know of social media audiences and how they consume content.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. So what is a recent campaign that you're proud of having worked on?
Yeah, so probably the most recent campaign I'm most proud of is our response to the stay-at-home orders as a result of COVID. So Build at Home, Let's Build Together. It has a couple names, but basically once stay-at-home orders were sort of being pretty globally spread, we decided very quickly as a business that we had a responsibility to lean in and support parents, kids, and adults that were stuck at home, desperate for things to do. Now, there could be an argument to be made that we wanted to, sell more product and drive awareness to our product and all that. But we made a very strong statement internally that this was not a commercial message. This was about, really driving awareness and creating content that was engaging to parents and kids and adults, as I said, that were stuck at home looking for things to do. So it was just a really exciting opportunity. I think it was because external production challenges and just traditional distribution methods were hampered because of COVID, we as an entire global organization really galvanized across our sort of social channels. It was great to see a singular effort across global and regional teams towards one objective, right? So it was everything from, building instructions to live build sessions with Lego designers from their home to, daily build inspirations to a series of different things. And we really leaned into that expression in the Americas on Pinterest, given that Pinterest is that sort of activity hub for a lot of parents.
Yeah, that was an excellent campaign. I was also a big fan of the Bugatti, where you built a actual working Bugatti out of Legos.
Yes, that was a super exciting execution, I would agree.
Definitely. Can you tell me a little bit more about your social media newsroom and how you engage with trends online?
Yeah, certainly. One of the biggest challenges and opportunities, depending on how you look at it, is because Lego touches so many categories, whether it's IPs like Star Wars or Marvel to Friends or Big Bang Theory, there's a lot of opportunity to lean into trends at a basic level. We're a pretty well-known brand, if not a very well-known brand, so there's a lot of opportunity. I think for us, we spent a lot of time ensuring that the juice is worth the squeeze, per se, right? And that we have a business reason to why we're doing this. Now that business reason may just be that this is too good of an opportunity not to lean into, right? But I think if you look at the Tesla Cybertruck as a great example of that, everyone remembers, or a lot of people remember the Cybertruck announcement, and I think the awe of the design of the Cybertruck. And it doesn't take an expert in social to understand that's a trending topic. Now, do we have a 24/7 listening setup? No, we don't. But do we use listening and data to confirm instincts around a concept, right? So in that instance, it's very important we confirm that, either the volume of conversation is on the rise or it hasn't dipped too far to the point of not wanting to engage, or that we shouldn't engage, right? And then it's understanding what the size of the overall conversation is and determining whether it's worthy of jumping in. So it's a pretty standard approach. I think people are probably a little bit surprised that we probably tend to say no internally to a lot of things more than we say yes, just because primarily, we don't want to exhaust what that real-time marketing muscle looks like. And we'd much rather have 2 or 3 Cybertruck-like moments or Oreo Super Bowl-like moments rather than a higher volume of more average moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about family life for a moment. You have 3 kids. How have you managed to balance the responsibility of family with your job, especially in this new remote working environment?
Okay, so I have 2 6-month-old twins, 6-month-old twin boys, identical twin boys, and a 2.5-year-old daughter. I think in any world, that's a challenging life setup, let alone staying at home. I'm very lucky that I have my mother-in-law here, so she's a great big help. And I'll be very honest that we also had a nanny or babysitter through COVID because, frankly, we needed one. But there was a time. I vividly remember the Let's Build Together brainstorm that started in Denmark at must have been at 10 o'clock in the morning. So for me, that was 4 o'clock in the morning. And I knew this was a big initiative that I really wanted our team to be part of. So I was up at 4, and I think I had, because I was on the night shift looking after my twins, I think I had gone to bed at 1:30. So it's been very challenging. I think, though, on the flip side, I'd much rather be surrounded by my family in this environment than, being a single guy living in my Brooklyn apartment like I did once upon a time. I think that would be a very different reality and a far more challenging reality. And I am concerned about how this plays out for that audience, as sort of we're working from home from longer and longer and longer time.
Yeah. Pros and cons, once again. So just fun question here. What was or still is your favorite Lego set of all time?
I will have to break that up into two things. As a kid, my fondest memories of my father, who is still alive. I say that, and I always think it makes it sound like he's dead, but he is still alive. Was playing with the medieval, the castle sets.
I remember
those sets so much. They were awesome. I had a basement with a carpet, which is not conducive to playing with Lego, and I never forget the greatest gift of all time was this massive sheet of plywood that my dad got from the hardware store that we threw on the floor. So yeah, castle set. I think now it has to be a set that isn't even out yet, that was announced fairly recently, which is the NES Nintendo set that just looks so cool, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it.
Maybe a little marketing plug there for the new release.
I will, yes, but I also will say that set's going to have no problem selling.
Yeah, no, that does sound very cool. So lastly, one of your key messages personally has been enjoy what you do. What advice would you give to young people out there trying to break into the industry?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, and I'm lucky to have the opportunity to speak at a few colleges. I think, listen, when I was out looking for a job, it was a very different world than what it is now. I had a lot of job experience, luckily, going out into the workforce after I graduated college. But now, as I understand it, kids in high school are, wanting to do internships and wanting to build up their work experience resume, which is terrifying from a competitive standpoint. I understand that it's significantly more competitive than it was when I was. So I'll set that as an expectation. I think, enjoy what you do sounds like a really obvious thing, but for me, not being an academic, not really enjoying school, I was only ever going to do well and get good grades if I enjoyed what I was doing. Right? Case in point, computer animation with a minor in painting. I was never going to go work at Pixar, and I never was going to be the next Picasso. That was never the expectation. The expectation was I needed to get good grades. A GPA is far more important at that time, at least. A strong GPA was far more important than, the details of the GPA. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to be a lawyer. I'm not trying to be a doctor. So it's different there. I just think you're inherently going to want to work harder and take pride in what you do if you enjoy it. And I think that's just a really critical component to what it is, especially when you're in an environment like being stuck working from home and you've got 3 young kids that really need personal attention and time, and you've got to make extra time and sleep less to do what you want to do. You wouldn't do that if you didn't enjoy what you did.
Absolutely. Great advice and something I live by myself. So thank you again for joining us. This was a really great conversation, and I appreciate you being here.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me.
If you're interested in hearing more insight and inspiration from industry-leading creatives, click subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts to become one of our listeners today. You can also join our newsletter for more insider content by going to assemble.tv/blog and signing up there. And you can find me on all channels at Nate Watkin. And don't forget, if your producing team is in need of a project management solution, try Assemble today to streamline your production workflow. Our listeners receive a 20% discount for their first year by utilizing the promo code Offscript. That's one word at checkout. You have been listening to the Creatives Offscript podcast, sponsored by Assemble.